I know a lot of people have asked this. Do you think that commercial recipes for distilling scale linearly back down to homebrew? Like in the beer world, it just doesn't work, right?
Yep.
With whirlpools.
Yeah, in most recipes, it's tough. Yeah, I'd say it's a good starting point. That's the best you can do.
Right.
You know?
So if your favorite distillery is going to give you the grist, then start there and then tweak based on flavor.
Be ready to tweak. You know, another thing that's really interesting is smoke. If you're dealing with any kind of smoke level, one thing we found, you don't need much smoked malt to make a very smoky beer, and smoky beers can really get smoky fast.
Yeah.
And they can become too smoky. And you think you might want a really smoky beer, and you make something too smoky, and you'll regret it. Because, too much smoke in a beer is very easy to do. One thing we found in the spirit side is that if you want a smoky spirit, you need a very smoky beer. So if you have an acceptably smoky beer, it's probably not going to make a very smoky spirit. You need something in your wash or your beer that's completely undrinkably smoky if you want it to come out nice and smoky in your spirit. So that's another good point. I know a local brewery distillery that makes a fantastic whiskey that's made out of a smoked beer that they do. And it's a fantastic beer. The whiskey is also fantastic, but it's not very smoky. Right. Because of that. Yeah. And that's just not their profile in that spirit. It's fine.
Have you noticed that the last smoked thing that I made came off the still like a smoke bomb? I came back because I collect individual cuts, because everything I make is always different, so I collect it into cuts jars and then decide on my cup next day. The next day I couldn't smell any smoke. It was gone.
Wow.
Put it into the barrel, still had no smoke, and over time the smoke is slowly returning. Have you ever come across that?
Yeah, I have.
I've heard of the Isla guys talking about it.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know if it's just changes in perception, but the fact that it's so consistent is kind of funny too. It might be different proof levels during the run. Maybe during the run you're tasting it at different proofs, and perhaps when you're barreling it, it's a very high proof at that point, and you're not going to get a lot of smoke at that point. And then maybe after barrels and you're tasting it and it's a lower proof, you might be getting more smoke.
Right.
That's an initial theory. But yeah, it's a very interesting. It's something I really notice, especially when proofing, is that when you're proofing something, you might be aiming for a number, and that's fine. But if you're aiming for a flavor, then really take your time. If you're proofing by flavor, proof down and maybe even wait a few more days and then try it again, because flavors really change during the proofing process.
Yeah.
When water and alcohol are combining, they create a really weird chemical reaction that lets off oxygen and heat and all kinds of things, and it really takes a while for the flavors to meld and marry.
Right.
I'm not a believer of marrying for months and years, but definitely within days and weeks you can see some changes, and especially adding water or marrying spirits.
It kind of makes sense to me, right? So when you proof something down, there's all sorts of things that were in solution that suddenly get spit out. And Isla whiskey's the epitome of that. It can be smooth and approachable. You add a couple of drops of water, which you would think would make it more smooth, and
then it's a smoke bomb also. Especially those smoky things are usually some kind of oily based, flavor compound, and so they're being dissolved by alcohol. Alcohol is such an interesting, cool thing. It can dissolve oil, and it can mix with water. Yeah. What else can do that? And so as that alcohol level drops, it's not able to hold as much of that rich oily flavors, and they just have to come out. Yeah. And once they come out, you can perceive them.
But I do feel that, because I've done that, right? I've proofed something down and it tastes weird. But I almost feel like over time, some of that stuff goes back into solution. Possibly. And homogenizes. And I kind of wonder if that's the marrying. I've always wondered if that's the...
And then with the proofing, when you shock the whiskey with water, all kinds of crazy, chemical reactions are occurring that you can't really see happen. Like you can see these, sometimes when you're doing a lot of water in a big batch, you can see tiny little air bubbles forming inside of there. And then, the general heat that's being created from that reaction. And so all those things are going to also then change flavor compounds as well. Yeah. Imagine, often you have these very complex flavor compounds. If you can imagine a molecule with all these, different atoms, And then sometimes all you need is just this little tweak over here on this very side of this very complex molecule, and it goes from flavorless to flavorful.
Yeah.
Or just the opposite, flavorful to zero.
Yeah.
Just with it's still a very complicated compound, but it's tweaked a little bit, and now it's flavorless.
Yep.
And so, yeah, interesting things can happen when you're adding water and playing with chemistry.